let's go ahead and get started. Hello, Shar Dundred.
Okay. Hello, Jay. Thanks for having me here.
Of course, yeah. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I kind of want to get back into the habit of doing it, so I wanna thank you for joining me and actually prompting me to do this because again, it's been a while and I just hadn't for a while. So thank you.
Yeah. I thank you for this opportunity because for me it's also something new. Unlike you, I've never done something like that before, so I'm not as experienced as you are. But I think it's a nice way to talk a bit about how things are going for the project, and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if anyone's unfamiliar, the idea of this series is like a set of creator interviews where we bring on folks who are making custom projects to talk about really whatever they want about the projects. My goal is to give Shar or whoever else in the future might come on an opportunity to talk about really what they feel is the most topical thing with their project. So I've got some ideas for topics, but otherwise it's the Shar Dundred show. No pressure.
Oh, thank you very much.
So I had a lot of fun with our two-player co-op series because it was co-op, right? There were some issues we had with that series, but it was really fun to play with you. So maybe if we find some other Warcraft stuff in the future, we could check it out.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So to viewers out there, if you're unfamiliar, Shar Dundred, he created the Legends of Arkain, and rather than me explaining that to you, Shar, why don't you give an intro to yourself and the series?
Okay, so I'm Shar Dundred, the creator of Legends of Arkain, as Jay already pointed out. I created 6 campaigns at this point, all playing in alternate timelines in a completely custom universe. I'm using Warcraft 3 to show them, to tell a story, and so to have you suffer through them, play them. And
Not every mission.
Not every mission, but micro missions are usually fine. No, I'm trying to tell my own story that has absolutely nothing to do with the Warcraft universe in itself. The 6 main campaigns that are currently released on Hive Workshop are also all pretty much choice-based, more or less actually. Some you can completely change a character's destiny, fate, or whatever in whatever way you please. I think the best example is actually the one where you have to choose, do you want a character to become obsessed with demon magic and stuff like that, or if you want to release a certain gas, so to speak. Yeah. And that's the spirit of Arkain, along with a lot of slaughter and murder and death and destruction. I think you can see it in the background, probably.
Yeah, so I've got Last Stand at the Golden Guard going right now. So I guess picking one of those threads to pull on, I want to talk about the choice-based stuff, but I'm going to put that on the back burner at first, because that's one of my favorite parts of Arkain. But I want to talk about how you bring up how it's about slaughter and murder. It definitely introduces some of the largest scale player-controlled battles that I've seen in Warcraft 3, and in Warcraft 3 projects, right? You typically are expanding the food cap, and you usually see at least 100 supply combat units constantly attacking each other. Workers don't cost supply, things like that. So I guess what's your general thought, inspiration for making a campaign like that? Because if there is one specific gameplay theme that I see in Arkain, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's really these really large scale battles where you're just kind of throwing armies at each other.
Yeah, and we would be correct about that. Inspiration, it's actually hard for me to tackle because I quite honestly don't remember. I know that I always liked these larger battles. I felt like many Warcraft campaigns when I started back in... It's 2014, it's been 6 years and I'm still doing this, oh god.
I know how you feel about that, yeah.
Yeah, you've worse with your YouTube, yeah. No, when I originally started, right, before the project was posted on Hive Workshop, that was in 2012, so even longer actually. I don't know what exactly was it that inspired me to do so. I just felt like many Warcraft campaigns were going for a small scale instead. I remember the Outsider XE campaigns back in the day. I think you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
Lord of the Clans and Last Guardian, and what was the third one?
Day of the Dragon.
Right. Yeah. Oh god, I'm going to get hated for not knowing that.
Very
they were
good
all
campaigns.
Absolutely. I haven't played it in many years, but it was very good back in the day.
He's still
like, they
updating
were
them,
all...
yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's why I have no idea how they currently are, actually. I started mapping overall. I mean, I've been doing modding for a very long time, but I never really got to finish my projects. That's a completely different matter. Let me finish the other point first. I just felt like many campaigns were going for small scale instead of bigger scale. So I felt it would be nice to make something different, because I liked these great battles from other games, actually. Actually, now that I think about it, Stronghold comes to mind because of the large armies you could send out there, and other games that encourage you to train massive armies. I can't really think of one that inspired me, to be honest. I don't think Stronghold really did, because Stronghold also isn't really mass-based like that, but it has a lot of siege missions in the campaign where you have like tens of thousands of units. I think you're getting Siege of Combe vibes now, probably.
Yeah, right.
And they just die. They just die.
Yeah.
I think it was like again. Yeah.
I get the... So, not to shift the topic too hard, and I know I don't want this to be like a pain point, but because I'm playing Armies of Exego. We've talked about this, and I'm not saying that like Armies of Exego is like your main inspiration, but in general, you do get a feeling of much larger armies in that game compared to Warcraft 3 and even StarCraft. I would say like Armies of Exego is like, it's almost like a weird hybridized child of Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3, as opposed to StarCraft. But in any case, the point is like you have these pretty large armies, like even like typical enemy attacks are like just large numbers of units, regardless of the power level of those waves.
Yeah. Now that you mention, I think Exego. I mean, I have some Exego inspiration, obviously, because I'm using Nexus as the name for the undecked factions. I'm pretty sure that one, I used that one from Exego, like the Splessier Nexus, the Rohir Nexus, and so on. I mean, Exego also uses Nexus, Nexi, whatever. I'm just using Nexus as plural because I actually don't know. Yeah, that was from Exego. Otherwise, yeah, I would say it's probably also an inspiration because I played a lot of Exego as well back in the day. Not as much today, but I'm pretty sure it was also something. I think I already told you this actually. If Exego had a decent editor instead of what it has, I would probably have modded Exego instead of Warcraft 3.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential in that game that it just, it's just sort of the ugly duckling child that never really got expounded on. It's too bad, because I agree. I think it could have a really cool custom scene if people had like cared about the game, I guess, when it was out, because there's a lot of cool stuff.
I mean, its problem is it's of course it's different from Warcraft 3, but it's still. I mean, it got called Warcraft 3 clone a lot for a reason, to be honest. I like Exego, but I still can see why people say that, and I also see that myself in the game. The problem is not that I don't know if people really didn't care about it at release, because I didn't play it at release. But I feel like the lack of modding tools is what really killed it, because the editor, I tried using it, is just annoying to use.
That's too bad, yeah. And really the only modding that I know of is the person who apparently knows the game pretty well, like inside out, but this user made a widescreen patch, which a lot of people use who play it today, and that's someone I think who is actually quite familiar with the inner workings of the game, but then just sort of disappeared, which is too bad.
Yeah. And I mean, you can't really blame him for disappearing, because the game didn't really ever catch up. I don't know I also don't really know why, because I wasn't there in the beginning of the game. When I played it, it was long after its release, actually. So I can't really give any insight on that one.
So I guess kind of coming back to what we were talking about, which is like the large-scale battles and such, I'm kind of curious to get your insight on, so like when you are making a map, you have a general idea of what factions are going to be going against each other. How have you typically made a decision of like how to balance the attack waves versus what's available for the player? Like, how, like, because, it's kind of a joke. It's like a tongue-in-cheek joke about, like, you want us all to suffer, right? Or maybe you actually do. The idea is, like, though, it's like, that's kind of the point of Arcane, is, like, it's tedious to an extent, but I also find it quite rewarding when you can succeed. And I'm wondering, like, what's your process when you put something like this together? Like, how far is too far, I suppose?
It's actually a very good question. I have like a blueprint for this stuff in my mind, actually, not an actual chart or anything. When I think of let me bring up a best example. Probably is the first mission of the first human book back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
You, not sure how much of you that you remember playing as Glenn against the orcs.
Clash in the Forest.
Exactly. You remember.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. The original idea was you started with knights as your units. It was the first mission in the campaign, and you could train knights, the best human unit on the ground, because the enemy was outnumbering you so hard and using many grunts. I also think with upgrades that increased the upgrades that gives them extra hit points and attack. To even out the odds, like you couldn't upgrade your knights, but your footmen just weren't enough to defeat that many grunts because you were fighting 3 clans at a time.
Yeah.
Or if you were, you can easily take the first one out. The other 2 are a bit more, take a bit longer to take out. Originally, you actually didn't have chaplains. I realized while playing that was a horrible idea. So. Some of these things, like unit limitations, depend on how I build the map. Like when I build a map where you have no access to air units and I give the enemy air units, or I give you only very few air units and give the enemy even more air units to counter that. It's like I'm just experimenting around and it works out originally, and I've somehow got a feeling for how to do it.
Yeah, and I understand that because I agree. I think, most things start with experimentation. I found in my time in, talking with people in the custom community, I found that people that tend to overplan are the ones that rarely actually complete something. Yeah, and I think it's finding that balance where, like, you need to experiment, and sometimes it does just sort of work out, or like you're really onto something, and then after like a little bit of iteration, you realize that it is working out. I think that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, you have to plan as well, because I'm like combining both planning and experimenting, both gameplay and lore-wise with things, and I feel like it works out quite well, actually. When you try to you have a blueprint, but you can also alter it to make sure that it fits a nice idea like you had, or you think it's not breaking anything, but at the same time it's just so rich to expand on.
So speaking of the lore, which is getting back to the choices mechanic that you have built in, so this is my subjective viewpoint, and then you should elaborate on your thoughts on how you've included it. So for me, I like the idea of the choices because I feel like it kind of makes a campaign a campaign. It helps tell a story. There's a lot of instances where if you just put a player on a map with a bunch of different factions with some tech trees, it's almost to an extent altered melee, which is okay to a degree, but I feel like by giving the player options to like change how their heroes behave, or like which heroes you get, or which faction you get, and any sort of player choice, it invests the player more. At least that's the outcome that I have gotten, specifically with Arcane, which I think is what attracts me the most to your work. And I guess is what is your thought on including player choice? And like similar to the difficulty question, I guess, is like how much is too much? Do you limit it, or have you just included everything you've ever thought?
Actually, when we talk about this topic, I'm never going to be completely satisfied with how much I include there option-wise.
Okay.
But the thing is, I could of course have added many more options, but often I find myself wondering, either why should this be an option? Like, is it really going to make much of a difference, or is it would it not include so much extra editing work later on that I would eventually lose my mind over it.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. I like using player choice, especially if it affects both story and gameplay. Obviously, with a true story that I'm currently working on, I have to cut that down a bit to establish like canon in that case.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still trying to keep choices in without completely removing them for things, but I cannot entirely say how that's going to turn out, but that's a different topic. Choices, I'm not entirely satisfied, especially with the ones in the orc books. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the undead books for obvious reasons here.
Sure.
Like the orc books, in retrospect, I feel like I should have tried more to make them stand out more. The thing is, many of events were in a completely different place, and the main faction, traveled to a completely different area.
Right.
So it was a bit of an weird to connect. Like, okay, you could kill that guy over there, and then like 2 kingdoms away, that was going to have what effect exactly, and stuff like that.
True. Yeah.
Which was also one of the reasons why I included there the massive decision between Red Fist and not Red Fist. Like, are you hostile or not Red Fist, so to speak, but I mean your attitude towards the humans in total.
Yeah,
which is, of course,
it was more like
Red Fist.
There was a system where like each choice kind of had like a point value, and if you were above or below a threshold, just
Exactly.
for context for anybody watching.
Yeah, like if you were doing enough things to harm the humans, Gardon wouldn't show up to offer an alliance to Amari because nobody trusts a race that keeps attacking and raiding you while a war is going on.
Yeah.
And if you went even further than that, Vanessa would have switched sides because the orcs were such assholes, so to speak.
Yes.
Which you cannot really blame her for. She has a point there.
Yeah, and I've found just from viewers talking about like that investment, like eliciting some emotional investment, is just based on comments on videos. I really like how people seem to be involved, even as only viewers and not even necessarily just players, about, again, if there are choices that the player and even viewer can be involved in, it invests them more in that faction. And people would talk about like, oh, I hate, like, seem like they genuinely like hate the orcs in Arcane, and therefore we need to go with Red Fist, etc., etc. Like, people just, I feel like that's what gets people involved more in the story, which is a good thing.
I don't know. I mean, Red Fist is the best father in the universe. Of course, you would agree with him. I can't say that.
So I have a non sequitur question regarding an ability in Arcane.
Of course. Yeah.
How come when people are really angry, they gain the ability to call down green meteors? Because this is a consistent theme between 2 different factions, right? Somebody's mad, and then suddenly they can like blast meteors down.
Gardon. Are you currently seeing that part in the video?
Well, actually, that's what made me think of it, because I'm watching this episode where you have Korra, and this ties back to player choice. You have to do a specific set of choices in order to allow Korra eventually get the ability to call down the green meteors, which is really good, but it also might not align with what story you want to play out either.
I mean, for Korra, it's like you have pretty much made her listen to the voice that she hears in the dark, so that's not so edgy, but that's the best way I can put it. And then she absorbs the powers of Scarlet, Redka, and Scarlet is the one who has that as an ultimate spell.
Oh,
that's basically,
okay.
That's basically, for Korra, the reason why she can suddenly cast that spell. It's not because she's angry at Papa Red Fist or anything. It's because she actually, like, she has taken that power from Scarlet, ripped it from her body.
Okay.
For herself.
So see, this is way more internally consistent than I could have imagined. See, I just thought it was it would be a funny line to bring up. But that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing was, originally I had the idea to add to make Scarlet recruitable without having to sacrifice Korra.
Mm-hmm.
But that was during a time when we had a certain problem that we already talked about in the Arcane for threats. That it was like, I'm not going to do that.
I gotcha. Yeah, well, again, in a way, so I guess I will provide a little bit of context, I'll start it from a higher level, and then we'll explain what you mean by that. So, because I feel like you have way more involvement from your Arkain community, and my community who's watching Arkain, etc., in like the story of Arkain. I think that they will then try to apply themes from other media that they like. So you're talking about the Guard and Harem anime thing, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
Where simply because you had the audacity to have a reasonable amount of female characters, it must be anime harem instead of they're just normal characters, right? So that's what, just for the viewers watching, that's what we're referring to. But again, I think it still plays positively into the fact that like people give a shit about the story here, which I think is like an incredible feat that a lot of projects will never be able to experience. Yeah.
I'm also really happy about that because that's something that is really important to me as a creator, that people actually give a shit about the things I write.
Yeah.
And I'm also, I often get the feeling that people care actually more about the story than about the gameplay, which is honestly, it's fine for me actually. It's not like I am sad because they don't care as much about the gameplay as the story. The story is the point where I spend most of my time when I work on Arkain, to be completely honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, Kazurkin spends so much time with the gameplay.
Right. It's nice to have people who can test for you. I guess, do you want to talk a little bit about like what impact testing has had on the when you feel that you're done with a map, do you send it to Kazurkin or do you play it yourself or both?
It depends. Like sometimes I send it directly to Kazurkin because I just know that things are going to work the way I intended them to work. And sometimes I just I test it myself to make absolutely sure. Mm-hmm. But that has actually shifted lately, lately as in the last few years. That I'm mostly sending stuff his way and before testing them, simply because, among other reasons, time reasons actually.
Sure.
And because I just know that when it comes to gameplay, that I can count on him pointing out anything to find anything, simply because I know when I send something to him, he's going to find a bug.
Yeah, and I think that's the best thing you can hope for, is having consistent testers where you're the developer. In a typical world, I'm sure like developers are playing their own stuff, but it's more like knowing that you can count on someone to just say like, okay, I think I'm pretty much done. There's probably something here I need to change, but like I can just have this person tell me what that is instead of having to spend even more time. Yeah, I think it's a nice balance.
Yeah.
But it's tough because like you need testers in the first place. I think unfortunately a lot of people don't have that luxury, so you definitely have to do one or the other. You need to either have testers or play it yourself. That's for sure.
Yeah. Play Arkain. I'm not insane.
You want us to suffer. You don't want yourself to suffer.
Yeah, sometimes people call me masochist. In fact, I'm the sadist here because I don't.
Right. Yeah, you don't play them yourself.
I do play my stuff, but I don't play my stuff like you do.
Yeah. So I think also along the sadism line is funny out of context, Jay Barino. Along the sadism line, we've had a conversation in the past that I thought actually was quite interesting. Is like, especially when I'm playing and I start getting a little salty, there's kind of a moment when I'm like, I realize this is supposed to be this way, and then I wonder like, but should it be? And I realize that it's kind of like you and I had discussed, like there's kind of a theme to Arkain where like it is supposed to be sort of maddening at times, but then there's also kind of a limit where it's like you don't want people to stop playing, I suppose. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course it's not. Sometimes it's really driving you mad, but I have to say, this just a little off topic here. When it comes to driving you mad, I had chapters that had bugs that drove me mad for several days.
I'm sure, yeah.
For example, actually here, the second human book, the third mission, the pass mission, there was a constant crash and we couldn't figure out what was causing it until I removed an AI. That's literally it.
Huh.
And regarding players, I want to make this, it's very difficult because I also wanted to make very rewarding to succeed. I'm not saying that Dark Souls was my inspiration because I never played Dark Souls. I never will play Dark Souls.
But it's
I'm
the same
leaving that
concept.
to you.
Yeah.
Yes, but I know I don't. I'm not doing that myself. I'm sending others. I'm more of a strategy guide. Like I send others to suffer.
Sure.
in that regard.
You should try it. It's fun.
No. I'm fine. I actually tried Dark Souls 2 and I wasn't. It was
that's
my
your
first Dark Souls.
mistake.
Yeah, I know. It was a bad decision on my part.
Yeah, the second one is an acquired taste, that's for sure.
Even I can make mistakes. So, yeah. No, like, I want to make rewarding and difficult. I don't want players to... I actually think what makes people go forward is actually the story in that regard. Like,
I agree.
You want to win this battle. For example, I'm going to bring up the Lords of the Golden Guard, your favorite mission that I can't talk about, for God's sake. The favorite mission with demon lords behind trees. Yeah, that has you gather wood so that you unlock the demon lords, la la la. And I mean, you play it, you have to suffer a lot through that mission. It's a fact. I'm aware of that fact. I'm acknowledging that. The thing is, you finish it, and you see that filthy traitor Jennifer, who made everything go wrong, and you see him just getting completely hammered by vendors. Like he's completely helpless and beaten into a pulp, basically.
Sure.
At the same time, that's like your reward for finishing the mission. On one hand, you had to suffer. On the other hand, you can see that asshole that made both the entirety of the first human book and this particular mission so annoying, and you see him just beaten down.
Yes.
So there's nothing left. And I think there is a certain satisfaction to that.
I agree, and also like, kind of mixing together, like you had said earlier, the player choice and not. So like Sir Larrig is an interesting thing from Second Human Book, where I think a lot of players will just kill him. Whereas, like, I usually am going to prioritize like in-mission min-maxing over story. Not to say that I don't care about the story. It's more like I'm willing to accept what the story gives me and will probably enjoy it regardless. You know, like whether Larrig is alive or not, knowing that I can use him on a much harder mission later, right? So I will always prioritize that first. But the fact that it's sort of intertwined in that way, where you give the player an option that, like you had said, affects both story and gameplay, I found to be very clever. And you've put in a lot of different mechanisms to allow the player to affect things, like simply choosing a specific leadership boni.
Yeah.
Affects Korra, for example. You know, you have that. You have like certain side objectives, whether you complete them or not complete them, which is something that you don't see really anywhere else, and I thought that was really clever. And then there's just like in cinematic choices too. Like you've got a lot of different options, so really good job with that. I think that's cool.
Thank you. I'm really glad that it worked so well. Which is also one of the reasons for the true story why I'm more hesitant to remove things like that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I need to set up a actual story if I ever want to continue the story without going insane. I mean, I already established some canon with the Tales of Arkain that I've published. Like, I'm not sure. Am I supposed to talk about a spoiler from the Arkain campaigns now?
It's up to you. You can.
I mean, it's okay. So, for example, Merlon, I'm very, very sad to repeat this because it's something that Kazukin and I are still sad about, is going to die.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that his death will be as maddening as it was.
Right, because it happens in a cutscene.
Yeah. I don't think I should say how it happens, but it's going to be less of that, less of a... I guess middle finger is a good word to put it.
That is how it felt, yeah, that's for sure. But there was an option, at least, where you could circumvent it, whereas now it sounds like we wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. I mean, in the comments you mentioned the option that if Edel wasn't corrupted, but at the same time, if you didn't get the diamond for Claire, that Claire would just stand here and watch him die or something like that. I actually wanted to include that, but I forgot.
Wait, I thought that was real. So that actually is not the case. Whether you get the diamond or not, she saves him?
I mean, you have to get the diamond and uncorrupted Ida. You have both.
Okay.
If you don't have both, then Merlon dies at that point.
Yeah.
But like your idea was that Claire would be there, but just stand behind, next to him and watch him die.
Yeah.
That's something that I actually wanted to add somehow in a way, but I forgot to add it.
Well, that's fine. That'd be like meme territory. I think it was pretty funny.
Yeah. I also had this other idea. This is going a bit deep now, and I apologize for that. I had this other idea where Claire would like, if you had the diamond, but Ida was still corrupted, that Claire would try to stop the arrow, but would die trying or something like that. And
so they both would die.
That. Yeah, I decided against that because it was.
You know what? That sounds legit though. I think though it's such a cool idea to even have that many possibilities, even though some of them are like miserable. You know,
everyone dies. The end.
Like I thought. So I think this was only in the beta. And I think I saw it in the beta, and I thought it was in the release, but you had changed it. Maybe you could talk about it. Is the choice between Solana or Loreen becoming the Elven Queen, right? Because I thought that if Solana became the queen, she would exile Loreen, but there was also the chance that you could do something where like they would both stay, but Solana would be the. You know what I mean? Like there were a bunch of different options. Yeah. I thought the beta actually had more options or a different outcome that got removed.
Yeah, the beta in that case didn't have extra options. It had a different outcome.
Okay.
That got removed, as you said.
Gotcha.
That's all actually that has made this the thing, because in that version, Loreen was just going a bit insane actually from a certain point of view. You could say that's also a feedback that I got. Like she realized that something was completely wrong. That Solana behaved very weirdly, which. I mean, she did in that version. I changed that for the full release, that Solana was less weird.
Less weird.
And I don't really remember actually what exactly was. It's been so long. The thing is, Loreen would get exiled again.
Again, yeah.
And then she would later try to kill Brian because she like realized that he was behind Gardon's shenanigans, because we both use shadow magic and Brian he looks like a shadow, literally.
Right.
And then she would like have a special arrow prepared that would even kill a Dreadlord, I think. And Brian was less like there, got shot by it, and it was like, okay.
No dice.
Nothing happened. Nothing. Because we both know that Brian is, despite the name, not a mere mortal.
Right. I did always find that kind of funny. Like this demigod's name is Brian, but yes, but it's because he's possessing someone named Brian.
Barizel.
There you go.
Barizel, actually, but you Barizel, as you said.
So, you had run as part of like the beginning of your work on the True Story, you had run like a Q&A.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you got like 100 questions, didn't you?
200.
So you got 200 questions. Do you want to share any that are like that you found particularly that like you didn't expect but you really enjoyed? Any you want to share?
I can also share one question that I did expect, something about racial intermingling or something.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you answer that one? Is there a in-universe answer?
Yes. Wait a second. I have to check. I actually have to check.
Okay.
Oh God.
So as you do that, I guess I'll plug the campaign. So if you're unaware, we've talked about the True Story of Arkain. Because there's so much player choice in Arkain, there's the first books and the second books. There's for humans, orcs, and undead. And they all take place in like concurrent but separate timelines. And that's because if you play as the humans, you can make choices that will change the outcome of what happens in the world. And then you play as the orcs, you make choices as the orcs that change the outcome of the world. So again, it's like the first and second human books technically take place in the same timeline as the like an alternate timeline of like the first and second orc books. I find that people struggle to understand this sometimes. Some people struggle to understand this. Why is Blend still alive in the orc books, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But the true
Stuff
story,
like that.
you're looking to reconcile that in that there's, it's not separated by race anymore. The player plays as all three and can make some choices for all three of them. Likely that will affect mostly gameplay and less story, is my takeaway here.
Yeah, the idea is that, as you said, the books confuse everyone. Also, the books made it quite... I really liked working on the books, 3 different timelines, because I think that's just an appealing idea. I think you said it in your own videos, that the player race is always the race that gets things that the others can't manage, like, example, very famous example, actually, Undead book, Undead Vanessa, and things like that. I just liked it, but the problem with that was that, as I already pointed out, it's pretty difficult to establish an actual, canon lore in that way, because you can't really, because there's so many things that are so different in the different timelines that just don't work together. For example, as you said,
like Undead Vanessa.
Yeah. Or Undead Vanessa, which was one of the reasons why the second Undead book got closed, but it's a different matter.
Yeah,
I actually found a question, by the way.
Okay.
The question was, can ogres and orc interbreed to create a race like the Mognatal from Warcraft? My answer was, I'm not adding Mognatal to Arcane.
Okay, that's fair. So the answer is maybe, but we'll never know.
Exactly.
That's a very
I mean, elves and humans can, of course, intermingle, for example, if you really have to get into that topic, but I mean, yeah.
Well, again, this kind of circles back to the whole point of, like, people get more involved in a story that they care about. No one's asking these questions in many other circumstances, even though it's weird, right? But, people only ask that stuff because they care.
I mean, the main reason why this question, the question itself is actually pretty harmless, if we're honest here. The thing is, in the last Arcane question time that I did in 2017, I had the questions: can pale elves and elves intermingle? Can elves and humans intermingle? And can succubi intermingle with mortal races? I got 3 questions like that.
So
from the same. I
guess here's the thing. This is off topic, but, like, what does you answering that question affect? I guess I just don't understand, like, what does it matter whether you, like, canonize that in Arcane? I don't understand. I don't know if anyone ever would.
I don't know.
Like, sure, buddy, if you want him to, sure. Like... Yeah.
You had canon and stuff like that. That's your thing. I'm not going to involve myself in that.
Yeah.
No. I mean... As I said, I'm really happy that people get invested with Arcane, and I'm a bit unthankful when I react like that when I get stuff like this, but it's just funny.
I agree. Yeah, it's just weird, but it's more power to, I guess, people who wanna. Yeah. Whatever. Anyway.
Completely off topic.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I have to see, actually. Here we go. I got a few questions, like, before I started really revealing a lot about the true story of Arcane, one of the questions that I got was, who is adding the new factions? Like, is that an effect of Largov and Eridon actually being aware what has happened at the end of the second Undead book? The meta ending, so to say.
I understand the question. That's actually that's like a super meta question. Yeah.
That's like a super meta question. Yeah, like did that somehow change the time? Like that's also why some people were actually confused why Largov was in the story again. The thing is, the epilogue of the second Undead book, to explain that, would be here that it wasn't like that this epilogue happened before everything actually happened. It wasn't a vision by Eridon. It was Eridon failing to remember the past correctly, more likely. Because he had lost his sight the way he thought he sees everything. You know what Eridon is like. I don't have to explain it
Yeah,
to
yeah.
you because you're familiar with the character. That he thinks he sees everything, controls everything in some way and anything, and he just doesn't. Not anymore, anyway.
Yeah.
Because he's trying too hard to control everything these days. He was actually not like that all the time, but anyway. And now he is remembering what really happened in the true story of Arkain, instead of him being like, okay, now I can change everything so that everything works according to plan.
Sure. That's a clever in-universe answer for, like, I had new ideas and I wanted to implement them after. But it's the same with how you did the epilogue in second Undead book, where, like, in many cases, hey, Blizzard, why are the Tal'Darim colored differently in Wings of Liberty, Heart of the Swarm, and Legacy of the Void? And they just say, oh, it's just like a different faction, you know? You know what I mean? That's like it's a hand-wavy answer that, like, yeah, it's an answer, but it's because, you know, they just made new models that they thought were better. Whereas, like, I feel like if you can cleverly answer the question in universe, I think that's pretty cool. It's a good thing.
I also think that's a completely different ship, but I'm still mad that they didn't change that ever.
Yeah.